You laughed at her business when it could barely pay for gas. Now that business owns your building. The sentence landed in the conference room like a glass dropped on marble. Caleb Mercer did not move. Neither did his mother, Diane, who sat 2 chairs down with her pearl earrings and the tight smile she wore whenever she wanted someone to feel small. Around them, the 28th floor of Hawthorne and Vale went silent. No clicking pens. No whispered side comments. No nervous little laughs from people pretending they were not scared. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the blue glow of the screen at the front of the room. On it was a logo Caleb had not seen in years, not since he signed away his marriage and told his lawyer she could keep the company because, in his own words, nobody wants that little delivery thing. Brooksbridge Supply. His ex-wife's company. Talia Brooks. The same woman his family used to mock for driving a used white cargo van through Atlanta traffic at 6 in the morning. The same woman Diane once asked, sweet as poison, if she planned to get a real career someday. The same woman Caleb had watched carry boxes into office lobbies while he told his coworkers she was figuring herself out. Now the board chairman stood at the front of the room with a pale face and a stack of papers in his hands, explaining that Hawthorne and Vale had been acquired in full. Not merged. Not partnered. Acquired. Bought out. The word made Caleb's stomach tighten. His younger sister Brittany, who worked in HR and had spent years calling Talia's business cute, leaned toward him and whispered, "This has to be a different Brooksbridge." Caleb wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe anything else. Then the glass door opened. Talia walked in without rushing, without smiling, without trying to prove a thing. She wore a cream-colored suit, simple gold earrings, and her hair pulled back in a smooth low bun. She looked calm in a way that made the room feel even smaller. Not cold, not cruel, just finished with being underestimated. For one brief second, Caleb did not see the CEO everyone else was seeing. He saw the woman who used to fall asleep at their kitchen table with invoices spread around her laptop, fighting to keep a small business alive while he stood in the doorway telling her the printer noise was annoying. He saw the woman who once asked him, quietly, "Do you ever defend me when I am not in the room?" And he had said, "Do not make everything about race and pride, Talia. My family is just joking." But they were not joking. They were measuring her. They were deciding what a black woman with a van and a dream was allowed to become. Talia reached the front of the room and placed one slim folder on the table. Her eyes moved across the executives, then paused on Caleb and his family. Not long enough to be dramatic. Just long enough for memory to do its work. Diane's lips parted. Richard Mercer shifted in his chair. Brittany looked down at her phone like she could disappear into it. Caleb swallowed, but his throat felt dry. "Good morning," Talia said, her voice steady and clear. "I am Talia Brooks, founder and CEO of Brooksbridge Holdings. As of 8 o'clock this morning, this company is under new ownership." No one breathed. Caleb stared at her, waiting for anger, waiting for revenge, waiting for the woman he had hurt to finally crack. But Talia did not crack. That was the part that scared him most. She simply turned to the screen, clicked the remote, and brought up the first slide. Operational restructuring and leadership review. Caleb's name was on the list. So was his mother's. So was every Mercer who had ever laughed at the woman now standing at the head of the room. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Mercer understood what it felt like to sit across from power that did not need his permission. 3 years before Caleb Mercer sat frozen in that conference room, Talia Brooks was waking up at 4:50 in the morning to the sound of her phone buzzing against a stack of unpaid invoices. The house was still dark. Atlanta was still quiet. Caleb was asleep upstairs, turned away from her side of the bed, while Talia sat at the kitchen table in an old Howard University sweatshirt, counting delivery routes with a pencil because her laptop battery had died again. Brooksbridge was not impressive back then. It was one white cargo van with a dent near the back door, a rented storage unit near Decatur, and a customer list taped to the refrigerator with a magnet from a gas station. But to Talia, it was real. Every box of copy paper, every case of hand soap, every breakroom coffee order meant one more client trusting her to show up. And she always showed up. By 6:15, she was loading the van herself, breath fogging in the cool morning air, palms sore from lifting cartons she could barely afford to replace if damaged. She would drive 30 miles across the city, smile at reception desks, fix wrong orders before anyone complained, then come home, and cooked dinner like she had not been carrying the whole day on her back. Caleb used to say he admired that. In the beginning, he would stand in the doorway with his coffee and grin. "You are the hardest working woman I know," he told her once. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. But admiration has a way of turning into embarrassment when a man cares more about how his wife looks beside him than who she really is. The first time Talia noticed, it was at a Mercer family brunch in Buckhead. Diane had set the table like a magazine photo. White plates, linen napkins, tiny bowls of berries nobody really ate. Richard talked about market trends. Brittany complained about a junior employee who lacked polish. Owen joked about people who called themselves entrepreneurs because they sold things online. Then Diane turned to Talia with that soft smile that never reached her eyes. "And how is your little supply project going, sweetheart?" Talia felt Caleb shift beside her. She gave a polite smile. "It is not a project. It is a business." Owen lifted his mimosa. Right. Boxes and paper towels. Very corporate." Brittany laughed into her napkin. Caleb did not. But he did not stop them either. That silence sat beside Talia longer than any insult. On the drive home, she stared out the window at the clean lawns and brick houses sliding past. Caleb kept one hand on the wheel, jaw tight, as if she had been the one who made brunch uncomfortable. "You could have backed me up," she said quietly. He sighed. "Talia, they were kidding." "Were they? You know how my family is." She turned to him then, tired in a way sleep could not fix. "Yes, Caleb. I am starting to." He did not answer. He just turned up the radio. And that was the moment something small inside her went still. Not broken yet. Not gone. Just listening. Because what Caleb did not know was that every joke his family made, every look they traded, every time they treated her dream like a stain on his image, Talia was learning exactly what kind of room she would one day have to own. The night Talia stopped hoping Caleb would choose her did not begin with a fight. It began with a dinner reservation at the Stonebridge Country Club, the kind of place where the parking lot was full of polished black SUVs, and nobody ever looked surprised to see money. Richard Mercer was turning 62, and Diane had made it clear the evening mattered. "Please wear something appropriate," she had told Talia over the phone, in that careful voice that sounded polite only if you were not the person being cut by it. Talia came anyway. She had spent the whole afternoon fixing a delivery mistake for a law office downtown after one of her suppliers sent the wrong shipment. By the time she parked near the country club entrance, her feet hurt. Her blazer had a faint crease across the sleeve, and there was a tiny scratch on the back of her hand from a cardboard box. She sat in the van for 10 seconds, breathing in the quiet, telling herself not to bring the day's tiredness into the room. Then she walked inside with Richard's gift under her arm, a leather desk organizer she had saved for because Caleb said his father liked practical things. The Mercer table was already glowing with wine glasses, candlelight, and laughter. Diane looked Talia up and down before smiling. "Oh, sweetheart, you must have come straight from work." Brittany's eyes dropped to Talia's hand. "That looks painful. Occupational hazard." Owen chuckled. "Careful, Britt. That is what a real businesswoman's manicure looks like." The table laughed, soft and mean. Talia smiled because she had learned that black women in rooms like that were allowed to be strong, but not offended. Caleb pulled out the chair beside him, but he did not touch her hand. He did not ask if she was okay. The dinner went on with talk about promotions, client accounts, who had joined which board, and which neighborhoods were changing too fast. Talia stayed quiet until Diane reached into her purse and placed a cream-colored envelope beside Talia's plate. "I wanted to help," Diane said. "A friend of mine runs an executive office downtown. They need a front desk coordinator. Stable hours. Benefits. A respectable environment." Talia looked at the envelope. "I already have a job." Diane gave a small laugh. "Of course. I only mean something more suitable long-term." Richard leaned back in his chair. "Caleb is moving up. Image matters at his level." There it was. Not concern. Not help. Image. Talia turned to Caleb. Her voice was low. "Is that what you think too?" He looked at his plate first, then at his father, then at her. The pause was worse than any answer. "Maybe they have a point," he said finally. "I mean, be realistic, Talia. It is not like your business is going anywhere." For a second, the room blurred around her. The candles, the white tablecloth, Diane's satisfied little smile, Brittany pretending to sip water to hide her grin. Talia felt her throat tighten, but no tears came. Something deeper than sadness moved through her. Recognition. She had been begging Caleb to see her, but he had been seeing exactly what he wanted to see all along. A wife he could love in private, as long as she did not embarrass him in public. Talia folded her napkin and placed it beside her untouched plate. "Happy birthday, Richard," she said softly. Then she stood. Caleb followed her into the hallway, his face tense. "Seriously? You are walking out?" Talia looked at him under the warm country club lights, and for the first time, she did not search his face for the man she married. "No, Caleb," she said. "I am waking up." He stared at her like she had spoken another language. Behind them, his family kept sitting at the table, probably calling her dramatic, probably feeling sorry for him. But Talia did not go back. She walked through the front doors, past the valet stand, past the people who never had to prove they belonged, and climbed into the dented white van they all laughed at. Caleb thought she was leaving dinner because her pride was hurt. He had no idea she had just left the marriage in her heart. The weeks after that dinner were quiet in the cruelest way. Caleb did not yell. He did not apologize either. He moved through the townhouse like a guest who had already checked out, leaving coffee mugs in the sink, sleeping on the edge of the bed, answering Talia with short words that made every room feel colder. When she came home late from deliveries, he would glance at the dust on her shoes and shake his head like her exhaustion was a personal insult. "You know, my father asked about you again," he said one night, standing by the refrigerator in his dress shirt. Talia was at the table sorting receipts, her fingers stiff from a 12-hour day. "About me or about how I make you look?" Caleb rubbed his forehead. "Can we not do this every night?" "We are not doing anything, Caleb. You are avoiding the truth, and I am tired of pretending not to see it." He looked toward the window, toward their quiet street and the neighbors' porch lights. "Maybe we want different lives." The words were soft, but they landed like a door closing. After that, everything became paperwork. Not a conversation. Not counseling. Not one honest moment where Caleb admitted he had let his family turn love into shame. Just an email from an attorney with the subject line, "Mercer Brooks dissolution documents." Talia opened it on her phone while sitting in the driver's seat of her van outside a dentist office, box supplies stacked behind her, rain tapping against the windshield. For a few seconds, she could not move. Her hand tightened around the phone until the screen blurred. Caleb wanted the townhouse. He wanted the shared savings divided in a way that favored him because, according to his lawyer, his income had supported the marital standard of living. He wanted a clean break. Efficient. Respectable. A divorce written in the same language his family used when they wanted cruelty to sound reasonable. That evening, Talia found him in the kitchen. "You had a lawyer send this to me?" Caleb did not look shocked. Only uncomfortable. "I thought it would be easier." "For who?" He loosened his tie. "Talia, please. Let us not make this ugly." She almost laughed, but her chest hurt too much. "You already made it ugly. You just hired someone to format it." His face hardened. "I am offering you a way to start over. By taking the house. You cannot afford it." There it was again. Not concern. Judgment. Then he nodded toward the driveway, where the old white van sat under the porch light. "I can have someone take that off your hands too. Give you a little cash for it. You should start clean." Talia looked at him for a long moment. The man she married was still standing there, but now she could see the price tag he had quietly placed on her worth. "No," she said. Caleb blinked. "No. You can keep the house. Keep the furniture. Keep whatever story helps you sleep. But Brooks Bridge stays mine. The van stays mine. Every client, every invoice, every contract, every box in that storage unit stays mine." Caleb gave a short, tired laugh. "Trust me, nobody is fighting you for that." Talia's hand trembled, but her voice did not. "Good." 2 weeks later, she signed the final papers in a small law office that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Caleb left first, checking his phone before he reached the elevator. Talia stayed seated, staring at the copy of the agreement. She had lost the marriage. She had lost the house. She had lost the fantasy that love could survive without respect. But beside her chair sat a cardboard box filled with Brooksbridge files, her laptop, her customer binder, and the keys to the van everyone thought was beneath them. She cried once, in the parking lot, with both hands on the steering wheel and the rain sliding down the glass. Then she wiped her face, started the engine, and called her biggest client. Caleb thought he had left her with scraps. He did not know he had just walked away from the only thing in her life that was about to become bigger than him. In the first few months after the divorce, Talia Brooks learned that starting over did not feel like a fresh beginning. It felt like waking up every morning under a pile of things nobody could see. Rent for a small one-bedroom apartment near East Point. Storage fees. Gas. Insurance. Vendor balances. Clients who paid late but still expected perfect service. Some mornings, she sat in the van before sunrise with a gas station coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, staring at the bank app like the numbers might change if she breathed carefully enough. But every time fear told her to quit, she remembered Caleb laughing in their kitchen. Nobody is fighting you for that. So she fought for it harder. She stopped trying to look like the kind of business Caleb would respect and started building the kind of business companies actually needed. It began with a mistake at a medical billing office. They had ordered copy paper, printer toner, breakroom supplies, and cleaning products from 4 different vendors, and all 4 deliveries arrived late or wrong. The office manager, a tired woman named Renee, threw her hands up and said, "I swear, I need one person who can just handle all of this." Talia stood there with a box in her arms, and something clicked. Not a dream, not a fantasy, a problem, a real one. "What if I could?" she asked. Renee gave her a look. "Could what?" "Handle it. All of it. Supplies, vendor schedules, invoices, restocks. You would deal with me, and I would deal with the mess." Renee laughed at first, but she gave Talia 30 days. Talia turned those 30 days into a system. She built spreadsheets at midnight, tracked usage patterns, called vendors before they failed, negotiated small discounts nobody bothered asking for, and saved that office nearly 18% in the first quarter. Then Renee told another office manager. Then a dental group called. Then a law firm. Then a charter school. Brooksbridge stopped being just a delivery business and became the person everyone called when their back office was falling apart. Talia hired her first employee, a single mother named Marisol who had been turned down by 3 corporate jobs because her schedule was complicated. Then came Jerome, a veteran who knew route planning better than any software she had tried. Then Alana, a 23-year-old Spelman graduate who could spot waste in a budget before most people finished reading the first page. Talia paid them before she paid herself. She knew what it felt like to be treated like help instead of talent, and she refused to build a company that copied the rooms that had humiliated her. One evening, after a long pitch at a co-working space downtown, a man in a gray suit approached her while she was packing up her laptop. "Marcus Bell," he said, handing her a card. "I advise companies that are ready to scale." Talia took the card but did not smile too quickly. Life had taught her to be careful with men who showed up right when something started looking valuable. "And what makes you think mine is ready?" Marcus nodded toward her slides. "Because you are not selling supplies. You are selling control. Most executives do not even know how much money leaks out of operations until someone like you puts a number on it." She looked at him then, really looked. He was not flattering her. He was reading the business. Over the next year, Marcus helped her clean up contracts, restructure pricing, and prepare for larger clients. But he never carried her. He did not rescue Talia Brooks. He handed her sharper tools, and she used them. By the time Hawthorne and Vale began losing clients and cutting budgets behind its polished glass walls, Brooksbridge had grown into something quiet, disciplined, and dangerous. Caleb was still telling people his ex-wife ran a small vendor company. He did not know her little company had already started solving the exact problems that were eating his from the inside. By the second spring after the divorce, Hawthorne and Vale no longer looked sick from the outside. The lobby still smelled like fresh flowers. The elevators still opened to polished floors and framed awards. The receptionist still greeted visitors with the kind of smile companies pay people to practice. But upstairs, behind closed doors, the truth was spreading through the walls. Clients were leaving. Vendor costs were climbing. Departments were blaming each other for mistakes nobody wanted to own. The company was still wearing a tailored suit, but underneath it, the seams were coming apart. That was why they held the vendor showcase on a rainy Thursday morning in the main boardroom, with executives, department heads, and procurement staff sitting around a table pretending this was a normal business review instead of a quiet emergency. Caleb stood near the coffee station, checking his phone, trying to look important. His father, Richard, had been invited as a senior advisor. Brittany was there from Human Resources, arms folded like she was already annoyed. Owen came in late with a grin and a paper cup from Starbucks. Then Brittany saw the printed agenda. Her eyes stopped on one name. "You have got to be kidding me." Caleb looked over. What? She turned the paper toward him. Brooksbridge Supply was scheduled for 10:30. Owen leaned in and laughed under his breath. No way. She is still doing that. Richard frowned like the name itself had dirted the page. Who approved this list? Caleb felt heat crawl up his neck. He had spent 2 years turning Talia into a small story from 3 months after the vendor showcase. Hawthorne and Vale stopped pretending the problem was temporary. The layoffs started quietly, first with open positions frozen, then travel budgets cut, then entire departments told to operate leaner by people who had never packed a supply order or tracked a late vendor in their lives. Caleb watched the panic spread through the office like cold air under a door. People lowered their voices near elevators. Managers closed laptops when others walked by. Even Richard stopped making confident speeches about legacy, because legacy did not pay overdue vendors, and it did not bring back clients who had already left. Then the rumor came. A buyer had been found. Nobody knew who it was. Some people whispered about a private equity firm in Dallas. Others said a New York competitor wanted the client list. Diane told her friends over lunch that Caleb would probably benefit from the transition because, in her words, companies need steady families during unstable times. Caleb wanted to believe that too. He told himself he was safe. He was a Mercer. His father had given 30 years to Hawthorne and Vale. His sister worked in human resources. His brother handled sales accounts. Their name was built into the place like marble in the lobby floor. On the morning of the announcement, everyone was called to the main auditorium on the 3rd floor. Caleb arrived early in a navy suit, trying to look calm. Brittany sat beside him, scrolling through messages. Owen leaned back with one ankle on his knee, acting bored, but his jaw kept moving like he was chewing on worry. Richard sat straight with both hands folded over his cane. Whatever happens, Richard said, we conduct ourselves with dignity. Brittany whispered, I just hope they clean house below director level first. Caleb gave a small nod, but his stomach was tight. Then the lights dimmed. The old Hawthorne and Vale logo appeared on the screen for a moment, silver letters against a blue background. A few people clapped weakly, out of habit more than pride. The board chairman stepped up to the podium, face pale, voice careful. Today marks a new chapter for this organization. Caleb leaned forward. New chapter usually meant cuts. New chapter meant someone else holding the pen. After a thorough review of our strategic options, the chairman continued, we have entered into a full acquisition agreement with Brooksbridge Holdings. The screen changed. Caleb felt the air leave his chest. Brooksbridge, not Supply anymore. Holdings. The room went silent so fast it felt unnatural. Brittany stopped scrolling. Owen sat up. Richard's hand tightened around his cane. Behind Caleb, someone whispered, is that the vendor from the showcase? Before anyone could answer, Talia Brooks walked onto the stage. Not from the side like a guest speaker. From the center aisle, like someone who had every right to be there, because she did. She wore a charcoal suit this time, sharp but simple, with a folder tucked beneath one arm. Marcus Bell followed a few steps behind her, along with 2 attorneys and a small transition team. Talia reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and let the room settle into the truth. She did not look at Caleb first. That hurt him more than if she had. Good morning, she said. I know acquisition announcements can feel uncertain. I also know uncertainty grows in places where leadership has avoided honesty for too long. A few executives looked down. Caleb felt his face warm. Talia clicked the remote. Charts appeared. Waste. Vendor overlap. Leadership redundancy. Client loss. Internal misconduct reviews. This was not revenge dressed up as business. That was what made it worse. It was business, and the facts were standing beside her. Then came the slide Caleb had feared without knowing it. Leadership review. Phase 1. His name was there. Brittany's. Owen's. Richard's advisory contract. All listed under evaluation. Diane, who had arrived late and slipped into the back row, covered her mouth with one hand. Talia finally looked toward the Mercer family. Her expression was steady, almost sad. No one will be removed because of their last name, she said. And no one will be protected by it either. Caleb stared at the woman he had once watched leave a country club with tears trapped behind her eyes. Now hundreds of employees were listening to her decide the future of the company that had made his family feel untouchable. He had spent years believing Talia's silence meant defeat. Only now did he understand. She had not been silent because she had nothing to say. She had been building a language powerful enough that everyone in the room would have to listen. After the announcement, the auditorium emptied in a strange, uneven silence. People who had spent years speaking over Talia now stepped aside when she passed. Some nodded too quickly. Some avoided her eyes. Caleb watched from near the last row, still holding the printed transition packet like it might explain how his life had turned upside down in less than an hour. His mother walked past him first, pale and furious. "Fix this," Diane whispered, as if he still had that kind of power. Brittany followed, blinking hard, her phone pressed to her chest. Owen muttered something about lawyers, but even he sounded unsure. Richard said nothing at all. That scared Caleb more than the rest of them. For the first time, the Mercer family had no speech prepared. Caleb found Talia in the underground parking garage 20 minutes later. Of all places, that was what cut the deepest. Years ago, he had watched her climb into a dented white van after the worst dinner of their marriage. Now she walked toward a black SUV waiting near the elevator, Marcus Bell speaking quietly beside her while an assistant carried a stack of folders. She looked tired, but not shaken. Caleb stepped forward before he could lose his nerve. "Talia." Marcus glanced at him, but Talia lifted one hand slightly, letting him know it was fine. Her team continued to the car. She stayed where she was. Caleb, just his name. No anger. No softness either. He hated how formal it sounded. "I wanted to say something before this gets messy." She looked at him for a second. "It has been messy for years. You are only noticing because the mess finally reached your side of the table." He swallowed. He had imagined this conversation during the announcement, but in his head he sounded calmer, better, more deserving of grace. Now the concrete garage felt too bright, too quiet, and every word came out smaller than he wanted. "I am proud of you," he said. Talia's face did not change. "Are you?" "Yes, of course I am. I always knew you were talented." For the first time, she almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No, Caleb. You knew I worked hard. You did not think it meant anything." He looked down. A car passed slowly behind them, tires whispering over the painted floor. "I was under pressure back then. My family could be difficult." Talia tilted her head. "Your family was cruel. You were quiet. Those are not the same thing, but they helped each other." The words landed clean because they were true. Caleb felt the old defense rise in him, the one that wanted to call her unfair, emotional, dramatic. But it died before it reached his mouth. He needed something from her. That was the truth sitting beneath every apology he had rehearsed. "The leadership review," he said carefully. "I know it has to happen. I understand that. I just hope you know my work should stand on its own." "It will. And my family?" Talia looked at him then, really looked, and he knew she understood. Not love, not regret, fear. He had not come down here because he missed her. He had come because the last name Mercer no longer protected him. "Every employee will be reviewed by an independent transition committee," she said. "Performance, conduct, compliance, and business need. Nothing more, nothing less." Caleb gave a strained laugh. "So after everything we had, you are going to treat me like an employee?" Talia's eyes softened for half a second, not because she wanted him back, but because once, a younger version of her would have begged for that sentence to mean he cared. "No, Caleb," she said. "I am going to treat you like everyone else." He stared at her, and the garage seemed to tilt around him. For years, he had watched doors open because of his father, his name, his circle, his comfort in rooms built for men like him. Now the woman he had failed to defend was offering him fairness, and it felt to him like punishment. Talia turned toward the SUV, then paused with her hand near the door. "You once told me nobody would fight me for Brooksbridge," she said. "You were right. So I fought for it myself." Then she got in, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving Caleb standing under the fluorescent lights with nothing to hold but the truth he had spent too long laughing at. The first morning Talia Brooks walked into her new office at Hawthorne and Vale, she arrived before sunrise. Not because she needed to prove anything. She had spent enough of her life proving. She came early because quiet had always helped her hear herself. The city outside the windows was still half asleep, Atlanta glowing soft and gold beyond the glass, traffic just beginning to gather on the streets below. Her name was already on the door, not printed on a temporary paper sign, not added beneath someone else's title, but etched into brushed metal. Talia Brooks, Chief Executive Officer. For a long moment, She stood there with her hand on the handle and thought about the woman she used to be, sitting in a cold van with a gas station coffee, wondering if she could stretch $40 until Friday. She stepped inside and placed one small framed object on the desk before anything else. Not an award, not a magazine cover. The old key to her first van. The dented white one Caleb hated seeing in the driveway. The one Diane looked at like it lowered the value of the neighborhood. The one that carried every box, every invoice, every prayer Talia made when nobody believed her business could become more than survival. By noon, the transition reports were complete. Richard Mercer accepted early retirement after the audit showed years of expensive advisory fees with little measurable value. Brittany was removed from human resources after multiple employees came forward about favoritism and quiet intimidation. Owen lost 3 major accounts when the review uncovered padded projections and client complaints he had buried. Caleb was not fired. That surprised everyone, maybe Caleb most of all. He was reassigned to a lower position under a new operations director, a young black woman named Alana Price, the same employee who had once stood behind Talia during the vendor presentation while the Mercers tried not to take her seriously. When Caleb saw the reporting structure, his face changed, not with anger exactly, but with the slow shame of a man finally meeting the world he helped create for someone else. Talia did not celebrate it. That was what people like Diane would never understand. This was not about making them feel small. It was about refusing to stay small so they could feel comfortable. Later that afternoon, Talia walked down to the loading dock. Instead of taking a meeting, she could have easily pushed on to someone else. The dock smelled like cardboard, coffee, rainwater, and hard work. Her employees moved with purpose, scanning shipments, checking routes, calling clients by name. Near the back, a young woman in a yellow safety vest kept glancing at her, nervous and excited. Finally, she walked over. "Miss Brooks." Talia turned. "Talia is fine." The young woman smiled shyly. "I just wanted to say, I started a little catering business on weekends. It is not much yet. People keep telling me to be realistic." Talia looked at her for a moment and saw herself so clearly it almost hurt. The tired eyes. The hope held carefully, like something people might try to snatch away. "Realistic is not the same as small," Talia said. "Protect what you are building. Learn the numbers. Keep your receipts. And do not let people who never had the courage to start anything convince you that your beginning is your limit." The young woman nodded, blinking fast. Talia smiled and kept walking. That evening, before she left, she called her mother from the office. "How does it feel?" her mother asked. Talia looked at the city, at the framed van key, at the building that once would not have made room for her unless she came through the service entrance. "Quiet," Talia said, "but in a good way. I think I am finally okay." And maybe that was the real victory. Not the acquisition. Not the title. Not Caleb learning too late what he had lost. The real victory was that Talia no longer needed the people who mocked her to understand her worth. She had built a life big enough to hold her pain, her dignity, her people, and her future. They had laughed because her dreams started small. But some dreams do not need applause at the beginning. Some dreams only need one woman brave enough to keep showing up until the whole room has no choice but to stand still and listen.